and indeed you could have ridden on the London Underground to go and see a public execution, because that's what the Victorians enjoyed doing at the weekends. They made a couple of sandwiches, threw in a couple of cans of Coke, and went off to see the public executions at Newgate. Yes, personally I'd rather see a game of soccer at the weekends, but the Victorians, they liked a good public execution, and of course it was absolutely free. Our next stop coming up shortly here in Victoria, outside the Grosvenor Hotel. By the way, the Grosvenor Hotel, over to your left, the very first hotel in London to have ascending rooms, otherwise known as elevators. This is our stop for Victoria. So let me just remind everybody this afternoon, my name is John, I'm your tour guide on the Yellow Tour this afternoon. Very importantly today our driver is Terry. The building over to your right is Belgrave House. Belgrave House today, European headquarters for Google. Yes, I did say Google, and if you haven't heard of Google, what have you been doing for the last 10 years? We're going to head into an area of London known as Belgravia. Now Belgravia, it became a rather affluent area of London to live after Queen Victoria moved into Buckingham Palace back in 1837. We're going to cross the traffic lights here in Belgravia this morning at Ebury Street. Many years ago, a very young Mozart was living here on Ebury Street at the traffic lights. Of course, there were no traffic lights then. A very young Mozart living at 180 Ebury Street to the left, and indeed he was living here with his father when he wrote his very first symphony. He was just 8 years old, living here on Ebury Street. Now, one of our former Prime Ministers, Margaret Thatcher, lives here today on London's Premier Square, Chester Square, coming up on your right. And if she's there today, a policeman will be standing outside her front door, coming up on your right, just here and to the right. Let's see if we can spot the policeman today. Here he is, tucked away in the doorway, just over to your right. By the way, Mary Shelley also lived on Chester Square. Frankenstein, you might remember, yep. And there's Mary Shelley I'm talking about, of course, and not Margaret Thatcher. We're going to head round Eaton Square this afternoon. Some of you might remember a TV drama called Upstairs, Downstairs. It was based on a fictional property here on the square. Now today, Roger Moore lives on the square. J.K. Rowling lives on the square. In the past, Sir Laurence Olivier, Sean Connery, Vivian Leigh and Madonna have all lived here on the square. And today, of course, Joan Collins also lives on the square, although she's not here at the moment. Unfortunately, she's in hospital, but she's awaiting the birth of her next husband. These gardens you can see to your left and right are known as key gardens because they can only be used by residents living here on the square. They have a key to the gardens. The Duke of Westminster has an apartment here. His name is Gerald Grosvenor. Grosvenor family, a very wealthy family own much of the property in this area. If you look over here to your right, you'll be able to see a sculpture of a lioness chasing an antelope. This is meant to represent the hunting nature of the Grosvenors, who came over here with William the Conqueror back in 1066. The name Grosvenor is from the French and it means great hunter. There's the Grosvenors. Duke of Westminster, I think, is third richest man in Britain today. Well, we're going to make our way now towards Buckingham Palace, or Buckingham House as it was known back in 1762, when George III bought Buckingham House from John Buckingham. He bought the house for his wife, Queen Charlotte. Now, Queen Charlotte's a very popular figure here in Britain, but George III, well, unfortunately, this was the guy who was responsible for the loss of some of our colonies overseas. And he suffered from a blood disorder known as porphyria, which caused him to have hallucinations. And this led people to believe that George III was mad. Indeed, he was called Mad King George. But, you know, he never moved into Buckingham Palace. Neither did his sons, George or William. It wasn't until a very young Princess Victoria, becoming Queen when she was just 18, that she occupied Buckingham Palace for the very first time as a reigning monarch, and it's been occupied by our reigning monarchs ever since. Let me just remind you that we don't actually drive around the back of the palace. We're not allowed to do that because we're public transport. So as near as we get will be the bus stop here at the side of the palace. Next stop is our stop for Buckingham Palace. Told you about the changing of the guard earlier. It will take place tomorrow here at 11:30. I did tell you about our walking tour. I'll remind you a bit later. Some of the soldiers that take part in that changing of the guard ceremony live here to your left in Wellington Barracks. Wellington